All right, Mom. Chapter 3.
Hello.
Hello. So we have only gotten to 14 out of 85 questions. So let's get to the 70 questions all in this episode. What do you say?
Okay. Sounds daunting.
Okay. So patron Cody asks, was Kirk born a nerd? And to define nerd, I think playing Dungeons & Dragons, liking nerdy kind of stuff, Star Wars, that kind of stuff.
Well, I don't know that he was born such, but he was always a thinker, and he wanted to make order of his world. He explored it, examined it, and determined where he was in it. So as a nerd, I don't know where that qualifies.
Did you know that Dungeons & Dragons was nerdy back in the day?
No, I thought it was dangerous.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second, just briefly. The Dungeons & Dragons panic and the satanic panic of the 80s was a thing. I understand it because we were talking about this the other day, the other month, that when you look at the books, the Dungeons & Dragons books, the main books, one of them is the Dungeon Master's Guide, and on the front is literally a giant devil that is presumably going to kill people and eat them. and so if you are prone or susceptible to worry of some sort of satanic influence, and there was a lot of that, not only in Dungeons & Dragons, but it was more so with heavy metal music, Judas Priest. There were famous cases where someone would go on a killing spree and they would say that heavy metal spoke to them and made them do it. Do you remember all that worry?
I do. It was a worrisome time because you're raising your children and you want them to be good influences around them. So you want to diminish the more questionable ones, whether it be a movie or whatever.
And there wasn't a lot of information provided.
No.
You could go to the internet.
No
so
internet.
Where would you have heard or been influenced? Was it at church or among friends or?
Not from church, not from the pulpit or anything like that, nothing.
I don't remember our church getting into that kind of stuff.
No, but I had church friends, I had neighborhood friends, and it was just basically for me, I don't know that I even talked with friends, but it was just unsettling, only because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was what. So it was easier to say no than to delve into it and find out more.
Mm-hmm. Did you have friends that were also afraid of Dungeons & Dragons?
I don't recall any, but I suppose if I brought it up, there might have been some that were uneasy with it.
Well, it was such a new phenomenon at the time.
It was.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't care myself whether my child gets passionate with a game or with a sport or a food. If they get so passionate that they can't function and be okay with life around them, then it's not a good thing. Mm-hmm. And sports can do that too. You know, you can get so wrapped up in it that it's all you know, to you personally.
Yeah, I remember you and Dad talking about that occasionally, about having balance and thinking of the future and the overall picture. Were you concerned about me and music later on?
Oh, no, I never. I think music's a wonderful outlet.
But were you concerned that it was interfering with school or something for me?
I don't recall that feeling.
Because I think Dad was worried about that.
Oh.
I mean, I could ask him about it.
Yeah.
But, so you don't remember feeling that way?
No.
I don't remember you saying anything, but I do remember Dad saying something. I mean, to be clear, I think the circumstances were that my senior year, halfway through my junior year, I had determined mathematically that I would get into the University of Washington, which is where I wanted to go, based on my test scores and my grades, even if I flunked all the rest of my classes, as long as I graduated. I mean, I couldn't flunk all my classes because then I wouldn't graduate. But as long as I graduated with F's and D's, then I was going to get into the University of Washington. So to me, it was illogical, since I was the logical one, it was illogical for me to try in school because I wasn't learning anything anyway, because the classes
I
were...
remember your attitude at that time, and I thought, whoa.
Yeah, you and Dad. Well, it's alarming,
just seemed But you put it into a perspective that your senior year for you, and this may or may not have been possible for other students, but for you, it really was an empty year. It was...
Yeah. I felt like I was in limbo. I was so mammothly bored. I remember just telling my friends, like, let's just cause mayhem because I'm so bored. I'm just so bored out of my mind. We had a class, maybe senior year, like a history class, and we spent the entire day, maybe even multiple class times, coloring in the states of the United States.
Oh, goodness.
Just different colors.
Oh, my goodness.
Like we were in the second, that's demeaning to a second grader.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, I didn't know it at the time, I don't think, but obviously the teacher was phoning it in too, you know? And I just thought, I did like some classes. I actually liked my science classes, physics, chemistry, calculus. But the other classes, I just thought, and then not only that, but just things in school were boring me. You know, football had concluded the beginning of my senior year, and that was a big part of my life. So, and I knew I wasn't going to play in college. I didn't want to. So I thought, what am I supposed to do?
You were very, very impatient.
I still am. Ask Stacy. I'm very impatient. I hate standing in line. I hate wasting time. Being program director at the university, a big reason why I quit being program director was because I was so impatient. There's so much wasted time in meetings and discussing stupid stuff that someone could just make a decision about in 2 minutes if they just thought about it. But anyway, so I was starting to skip school occasionally as well because what's the diff? And I started getting these discipline letters my senior year. And for me, that was rare. I was usually getting at least close to a straight A's. You know, I was one of those students. So to go from that to getting D's and F's and pink slips in the mail, Dad, I've never seen him as angry as he did when he confronted me about this. And I think he equated the one thing that I could actually entertain myself with was songwriting and recording. And so I think Dad thought that was interfering with school, and I kept telling him no, and I knew it. There was no fighting back because I just knew I was right. And then years later, maybe not too long later, he talked to a professor friend of his at University of Washington, and Dad was like, my son believed this ridiculous thing. And then the professor said to Dad, well, actually, your son was right. And so Dad came to me later. He's like, you were right, though. I felt bad for Dad. I felt
strong sense of knowing.
Yeah. Well, I felt bad for Dad. You know, it's kind of parallel with you about knowing that you were going to marry Dad, you know? I mean, I don't want to elevate myself to something like that, but it's
true. There's
parallel.
This line that you set for yourself.
Yeah.
And you know what is right for you.
Yeah.
You make a decision for you.
Yeah. So, patron and YouTube member Lauren B. from North Carolina, she says, given that Kirk is so gifted at music, which I'll just chime in and say we don't know if gifted is the right word, but what are your own musical passions or abilities? What kind of music do you enjoy to listen to most? Did you play any instruments?
Well, I was exposed to music and instruments as a young child. I was encouraged to begin taking the violin. I also had a neighbor who taught me the basics of piano. I didn't get very far in either one of them.
I didn't know you played either, honestly. Well, you play piano now.
Yes, I do. I wish you could get from beginner to master very quickly, but it doesn't work that way. But your interest in music really does come from your father. Uh-huh. And his being able to hear and point out to me, oh, listen to this drum, or listen to this piano portion, and pull out different things. Whereas to me, I hear the broad music and I can enjoy it. I love music. I enjoy it. I like having it in the background of my life, but I certainly don't have the depth of appreciation as you and your dad do.
Yeah. I remember Dad would just put on a record and sit alone in the living room and just nod his head to Stevie Wonder or Spyro Gyra or something. But I will say, Mom, that you do carry a tune. You can sing.
I can sing, and
Yeah.
I did participate in a choir or a chorus,
Yeah.
regardless.
Patron member and YouTube member Ollie, she says, "No question. I just want to thank you for raising one of the most generous, inspirational, thoughtful, intentional, and empathic people on the planet. So excited and curious to learn more about you." Oh, that's nice.
Oh, thank you. I really don't feel like I can take a whole lot of credit.
But don't you and Dad take pleasure in knowing that your kids are thriving and happy and get along and
Yes.
and appreciate you?
In fact, we say that to one another often throughout. Sometimes it'll be throughout the day, sometimes it'll be throughout the week. But it's something that is present in our minds continually, that we have really wonderful, accomplished children.
And in the movie version of this, there would be a flashback to when you're coming up for air at the drive-in movie theater, and you're talking about the future.
Oh, goodness.
And you're talking about how you want to have so many children, and that moment when the two of you reveal that. How many kids do you want? You're like, I want 12. And Dad's like, I want a lot of kids too. And you're like, oh my God, this is going to be great. We're going to have a great family. And then, fast forward
And not even thinking how that great family is going to present itself or evolve.
Yeah.
How to do that. How does one create that?
yeah. And then back to necking.
Oh, goodness.
Patron Carla and Natasha from California, good old Natasha, they both say, in what ways is Kirk's personality similar and different to yours and his father's?
Oh, well, that is fun, isn't it, to think about? Well, I would say that his dad is very methodical, likes to think things through from beginning to end, likes to have his T's crossed and his I's dotted.
His penmanship is very blocky and precise.
Yes.
Your penmanship is spectacular, but it's cursive.
Yes.
Like it's the best cursive I've ever seen. It's like calligraphy.
Thank you. But he's a thinker. He's in his head a lot. I guess what I mean is that I have to say, hello, I'm about to speak to you. And because he's in his head, Kirk was like that, even as a young child. We would say to ourselves that he's in his own world, and meaning that he was happy there. He was enjoying what was going on in his mind and could imagine. He had a great imagination. So there's that's similar to his father, because I believe that of Kirk too. And then we've talked just recently of the music aspect. Both of them share really a depth of music, just a true enjoyment of all music, all genres.
And then Dad's mom,
yes,
my grandma, was an accomplished singer.
Yes,
and,
operatic.
Yeah, and so in the Spokane Japanese community, if you mentioned Kazuko Honda, they would, the singer, But in my impression of myself as a young preschool or, 7-year-old kid was that I might not have been as loud as my older brother and sister, but was still loud myself, right? No?
You were just very normal.
Oh.
You were engaging. You would play with your friends. You didn't have a shyness about you at all that I was aware of. You might have had moments where you might have felt uneasy, but it didn't manifest itself into any particular behavior.
But I wasn't obnoxious, like loud.
No, of course not. You are not. Now, as far as things that I might have influenced, might be order and having a neatness and organized way of wanting your life, bringing.
That's really interesting. So you consider yourself more neat and organized and anal retentive about those sort of things than Dad?
Yes.
Because growing up, the house kind of had both. It was
Yes.
neat, but also cluttered.
Yes.
Like we had that drawer I always think of that drawer.
The junk drawer.
The junk drawer
You need a junk drawer.
in the kitchen.
Yes.
But there was quote unquote junk in there that went back 20 years.
Yes.
That should have been organized away at some point.
You
And,
just don't know when you're going to need it.
yeah. We're going to need that half-broken toothpick or something. And it was truly a junk drawer. Like, if you looked at a junk drawer in today's homes, I'm guessing it would have things from the past couple years or something.
Some pens.
Yeah.
Rubber bands.
This junk drawer, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, soil was developing in the back of and moss was starting to grow. You know
Well,
what I
I
mean?
found old M&Ms in there.
Exactly. Like organic material was in there. It was really an interesting drawer. I mean, it was used for things. There were things on the top of the junk that we might need.
Might
like,
go for.
That's interesting because Dad presents as very orderly. But when I think about his office before, when Mark moved out and Dad used Mark's old bedroom as an office, that office was pretty cluttered. And when I think about your childhood homes, your house growing up was very neat. And Grandma's house, Dad's family's house, the Japanese house, was a lot more cluttered. And I didn't realize how cluttered it was until I went upstairs one day and to an area where apparently, because that's where
Nobody was living up there any longer.
all the
using
kids,
it.
yeah, all
Right.
the kids lived in the top floor, and once they moved out, they just ended up using the top floor as a storage area essentially, and it was like an archaeological dig. I opened I would never forget. I opened a drawer, and there was a golf ball that had melted in the drawer because in Spokane it gets hot,
hot.
and then the upstairs gets hot if you don't open the windows and stuff. And so I just marveled at and it was the first time I found out what the inside of a golf ball looks like.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And I find that to be kind of true. Japanese American restaurants are often tidy in the front, but as soon as you step to the hallway to go back to the bathrooms, it's a jumbled mess. They'll have storage in the bathroom. In the bathroom will be like food stores, not like out in the open
Or
food.
cleaning supplies.
Yeah, but there might be jars of shoyu, of soy sauce, in the bathroom at a Japanese restaurant. I'm sure that's not to code, but you'll see that. And I think it's because in Japan, space is pretty limited, so
It is.
you have to do what you got to do. So the aesthetic or the preference is like, well, you just sort of make do with the space that you have. That's interesting. I never would have thought that you were the neat one, because I'm very neat. I wasn't always, but...
And your siblings. Each one of you.
Yeah. Kevin's very neat.
Kevin, Colleen is so organized you wouldn't believe. I mean, everything has its place. Yet her house is... both Kevin and Colleen have smaller homes to hold a lot of things.
Right.
But they find a way to make it work. And then Mark has always wanted to have this really it's an organized situation. It's what you need order in order to lift some of the chaoticness off your shoulders, I think. For me, I may not have been clean. I wash the floors, do the dishes at appropriate times, that sort of thing. But that didn't mean that I didn't desire it. I wanted order and
Yeah, I guess the reason why I'm a little surprised is because there was never a point where you were bothering anyone with telling people to be cleaner. I don't remember. It was a house of 6 people, and there was a lot of chaos, and it was the 70s in my early childhood. And I remember I would be out and about all day and climbing trees and getting pitch sap, pine tree sap on my hands. And that sap is almost impossible to get out of your skin. And I would come into the house for dinner, and I would just be covered in dirt that stuck to the sap on my hands. I would be eating dinner. You'd be like, oh, you got to wash your hands. And I'd be like, oh, okay, fine. So that tells me that there was some threshold there that was unacceptable. But that's a pretty low threshold, right? It wasn't.
Well, I thought that we had raised you to wash your hands before dinner.
True, but I didn't always do it.
Oh. I guess that's understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of things I didn't become more neat and organized until I was in maybe my 30s. My bathrooms were pretty dirty in the 20s. I didn't really floss until I was older, and now I floss after every meal. I actually don't like the feeling of not flossing after a meal, or at least having a toothpick or something. Well, how else am I like you, Mom? Because I could identify a number of things that I'm like you.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you enjoy reading, and I absolutely love reading all genres. It doesn't matter. I like history quite a bit too. Technology, I feel like we share in the excitement of new technology. What will this do?
Well, one of the things that I always think about with you is you'll say, there's nothing like having the right tool for something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so important. It can make your life so much easier.
Yeah.
You know, blunt scissors or pinking shears, they all have, each tool has its purpose for a reason. It's going to make your life easier. So, yeah, I think having the right tool is very important.
Well, I'm like you in that I talk a lot because Dad can talk a lot, but you and I and Colleen in particular, maybe Mark as well, talk a lot. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of other extended family
Even
members.
if you don't want to listen.
Right. A long time ago, I noticed that you and I and Colleen, really, you, me, and Colleen are like, there's pros and cons to this, and the listeners will very much know what I'm talking about, that when we're telling a story or explaining something, we are very sure to give as much detail as possible. We really want people to understand.
Get the whole picture.
Yeah. And I think we're also kind of in our own heads exploring it, not necessarily caring if people care to explore it with us.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we might, like I am doing right now, just go on way too long. Other people, Dad, for example, Kevin, it's the other direction where you have to ask, like, okay, what? Like, tell me more. Stacy's like this too. They'll tell a story. They'll be like, oh, yeah. I'll say, how come you're late? They're like, oh, it's a store. Silence. What do you mean? What happened at the store? Oh, there was this guy. Period. What do you mean? A guy at the store? What happened? Oh, well, things happen. And it's not that they don't want to tell. Mm-hmm. It's just like they're not used to talking or something. I don't know. Whereas you and I, we might walk up to a stranger, or not a stranger, but because I'm not like that. You might be like that, but and you're nodding your head. But say we come home and we're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I'm late. Let me tell you why. And the person's like, I don't really care. But it doesn't matter because we're going to tell you because we process, I think, verbally. At least I know that about me. Like something happened, I need to process it. And that's the definition of, one of the definitions of extroversion is that you have to talk things out with someone. You can't just do it internally. So I get that from you. And a podcaster needs to be that way. You have to want to process things outwardly. You have to want to say stuff. Like with Bob, my co-host, he is not one of those people necessarily. And so when I am podcasting with him, for the listeners out there, I edit these portions out usually. But when I'm podcasting with Bob, I have to pause the recording and remind him that he's supposed to talk. So not only should be talking as much as me, but you should be talking a lot.
And he has wonderful things to say, and the listeners love to hear him.
Yes. But so I am like you in that way. I'm also like you. You were saying, I think in the last episode, about how us kids enjoy life. We squeeze the juice out of the orange, if you will.
That just thrills me. Absolutely thrills me.
Because that's you. Oh. Dad certainly, who doesn't enjoy squeezing juice out of an orange, but you're really like that. Like one of the quintessential examples of this, we were in Chelan, Washington, and it was hailing. It was a summertime or springtime, and it started to hail. Or no, it started to rain hard or something. Rain or
cloud.
Yeah, like a warm, stormy summer kind of thing. And everyone sought shelter underneath this awning and went into the hotel rooms because we had all these family members, like 20 of us or something. But you said, let's run in the rain. And you grabbed Jessica, your grandchild, and the two of you, because she loved it. She's 3 years old or something. And the two of you are running through the water and splashing in the puddles.
Just pouring.
Yeah. And you're 65 at the time, or 60 years old. This is so. And then I, at first, was like, what's Mom doing? But then that part of me that is you joined in with you. And then it was you, me, and Jessica running through the rain while everyone else just looked at us like, what's wrong with us?
What's wrong with us?
I am so much like that. I'm so much like that. New experiences.
Yes.
I want to have adventures. That's part of the boredom, I don't want to settle in. When Stacy and I think about a restaurant to go to, like for brunch or whatever, and it's not like a special occasion, she always wants to go to the same set of restaurants. She locks in on something and she's like, that's where I want to go. Me, I don't want to ever go to the same place twice.
Right, me too.
Even if it sucks, it's like at least it's an adventure.
At least you found out, to have an opinion whether it's good or bad. Yeah. Let's keep going on to this place and that place and
I bet your dad
explore.
Is like Stacy.
Oh, McDonald's.
I mean, literally McDonald's.
Yes.
Yeah. Before and during the pandemic, still maybe, your routine was you'd go to YMCA to work out, and then the two of you would go to McDonald's.
For coffee and newspaper.
And
well, I like their breakfast burrito.
So you'd get the paper, you'd have McDonald's coffee, which I have to say I'm not a fan, and then you'd get your every time
every day,
and you'd read your paper at the McDonald's and and
work our puzzles.
Yeah, all for under $5, probably the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that you're a wonderful risk taker. Not dangerously risky, not jumping from cliffs and.
Well, I was in high school, but
that sort of thing, but stretching your boundaries, finding out if something will work or not being held back with fear or not being good enough. Who knows whether you're good enough until you try it?
Yeah.
So go for it. That's something that's I'm getting teary because it's so strong in me to try. Get out there and do it.
Well, I think for you, Mom, you were held back by sexism.
Yes. We didn't have Title IX. We didn't, for sports, I think I might have, had I been encouraged or if even the opportunity came, I might have been an athlete. I had good bones and muscles. And,
but it didn't matter. Even when I sucked at things, I still tried to.
Yeah.
Also, I'll never forget, 30 years ago, you told me that you would have been a CEO to the family construction business. Well, you had thought, and I don't know your brothers that well, but I could absolutely see you having been a fantastic, well-rounded inheritor of the business, someone that would have shook hands but also been organized, someone who could have managed other people well, someone that could have balanced people's personalities and not been prideful and been a good public face, but because of sexism,
women didn't do those things.
It just wasn't even a consideration. And you had the thought when you were young that maybe I could do it, but it just was never on the table, right?
No.
Yeah, because I didn't, until I knew that, I thought you didn't have ambitions, but you did. Or at the very least, you would have been a third partner or something that could have done well in your way.
But even in my family, that would never have happened.
Yeah.
They had a hard time even accepting the youngest brother, what he might be able to bring to the table. The fortunate thing was my youngest brother recognized that and decided he wasn't going to be a part of the firm.
Well, also he's a boy, so he...
Well, he could make that decision.
Right, he could make that decision. He became a very renowned architect in Pasadena, California, and was featured in Martha Stewart Living
Yes.
as his own house, actually,
Yes.
his garden in his house.
The creativity for his garden.
Yeah. And unfortunately, he passed away early in his mid-60s due to early onset Alzheimer's. Yeah. So just imagine how things could have been if there wasn't sexism or if you were a man. The college implications and the career implications and the sports implications and the adventure implications, it's
As a woman, and as a young woman growing up, it was very limited as to what we could do. And I recognized that in high school because I refused to take typing. Many of my friends, all of my friends, took typing. That just seemed to be the thing to do. I refused to put it on my coursework because I would have to be a secretary, a teacher, something in the administration field. And if I didn't know how to type, I wouldn't be able to go that direction. So that was my, passive way of saying I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Then, many long years later, when I'm 50 years old, what do I do but take a typing class and become a transcriptionist?
Right.
And then transcriptionist for the medical field and then later into the legal field.
Doctors would dictate into a recorder and then you would listen and type it up.
And you had to have very quick speed, over 110 words per minute.
All right, let's take a break, Mom, and when we get back, more questions. What do you say?
Okay.
All right, we're back from the break. So, yeah, just to wrap up how I'm like you and Dad, I think there's a lot more I could say to that, but I don't think you give yourself enough credit for the amount of influence you have on us. Of course, we're our own people, me and my siblings, and we developed in our own ways, but there are some pretty obvious personality through lines and lessons that you gave us that I think you should be taking credit for. I should mention that after we stopped recording last time, you were worried about the upcoming questions having to do with parenting and daycare and stuff. And I thought, well, what's the worry? We don't have to go into that. But after I kind of prodded for a bit, you revealed to me that you didn't think you were a good parent or a good daycare facilitator. And I was like, what? I mean, of the things that you and Dad should hold tremendous pride in is the obvious skill and adeptness and choices that you made as parents to don't even consider your personalities or like the things you did well. Just the fact that there weren't problems. You didn't drink. You didn't hit us. You didn't swear. No one swore in our house. It's kind of a detail, but it tells you something about the lack of chaos and the lack of yelling, the lack of hurting each other's feelings directly.
Well, and I came from that background.
Where people would yell and swear.
Alcohol,
Yeah.
hitting, swearing.
Yeah.
It was all there.
Yeah. And quite an accomplishment that you would turn that around, so effectively. We couldn't tell each other to shut up. That was a swear word.
Or call one another stupid.
Yeah.
Or anybody stupid.
We couldn't say fart. We had to say let one.
Yes.
And
you couldn't hate.
Yeah.
You couldn't use the word hate.
Right.
I hate this.
Yeah.
You could say, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like it a lot.
Yeah.
But you couldn't say hate.
Right. And, these are rules, but what it illuminates is this, what the listeners will often call me, wholesome. Maybe that's something that I could also attribute to you. The listeners will identify me as being wholesome and nice or something. And so I get that. At least I developed that within the environment that you created. Secure attachment. People know that I talk about that all the time. The attunement that you and Dad had. I remember just feeling completely safe going to bed. The two of you would read stories or and kiss us goodnight, that kind of thing. Life had its ups and downs, but in terms of the things that I hear, not only from my clients but my friends, are largely absent when I was a kid. not only that, but also the example that you set, the stability, the honor, the treat each other well, the non-narcissism, the we're not any better than anybody else. I'm not any better than anybody else. Giving back without trying to be flashy about it, You would give to people, whether it was at church or parents at your daycare who couldn't afford the daycare. You didn't tweet about it, so to speak, or whatever. You would just have to hear about it, through back channels, and I'm sure we only heard about some of it. So, but most of all, just the feeling that I had growing up that you and Dad knew me and cared about me and didn't overreact to things. There wasn't a flip out around this or that. And when I cried, you were there, and when I was laughing, you were laughing, and it was all that. And there were so many other things you could have done. You could have been in a bad mood. You could have done your own thing. You could have had your own hobbies. You could have taken your anger out on each other more or something. I don't know. There's just so many things that could have happened, fallen into addiction, or even the fact that we never moved, especially for me and Kevin.
Yes, that was pretty major.
Yeah. I mean, the more I experience other human beings, the more I learn that for people, even if the family's doing pretty well and you move, especially if it's a few times, the disruption to your life, to your friends, to your safety, to community is traumatic for a lot of kids.
Well, there's a curious memory regarding that. You were about 7 and you thought it was time to move. You brought it up to Dad and I and said, so let's get moving, let's find another home.
Why?
I don't know where it came from. Maybe you had a friend who was moving and you thought it sounded adventuresome, but...
Yeah. So, Mom, you should have tremendous pride. I thought at the very least, I didn't think you would brag about it, but I thought at the very least you felt good. But you feel bad about your parenting. You feel bad, and Dad's this way too, I know. You feel bad about what you did. That is a complete crime, Mom. It's just like, it's not okay. And I have failed as a kid, and my siblings as well, to not, we say it all the time, but you don't absorb it. Like, apparently you don't absorb it. You think we're just being nice or something?
Yes. It's very difficult to recognize the impact you have as a parent. Because as a parent, isn't it, well, it is for me, that I think, well, I could have done this, and I could have done that. I should have done this better. You might see for the moment or think, well, that's good. We had some good laughter or something, but you don't see it as canceling out what the possibilities to do better. So, yep, I'm tearing up at the moment because it's just a very hard concept to take in. I've always said this about Mother's Day, how it's very uncomfortable to be singled out as a good mother, because I just see many mothers who overcome so much or are so full of wisdom, full of courage.
Like who? Like what?
I don't know. But the world is full of excellent, wonderful mothers.
Who? Identify one person that you could identify that is a better mother than you.
I don't feel I measure up to all the wonderful women.
Who?
There are just many. I don't have names, but
like famous mothers who.
No, think about it. Think of the mothers who struggle day to day. The single moms, the moms who are working multiple jobs, the moms who are able to create art and
I wouldn't have wanted you to create art. That would have bugged me if you. All I wanted you to do is to pay attention to me.
Well, there are just many wonderful women who manage to do that, and be good, strong
This is like
mothers.
this is I don't know, your parents in your head or something. You feel like you're not worthy of Mother's Day. That's really a tragedy, Mom. What's that voice?
Don't know.
Well, it breaks my heart. And let's work on it, because in your elder years, you deserve to have that at least, which you should have had the whole time. And Dad.
I do believe it's something we share. We both
Hate yourself? For no reason.
feel inadequate, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. And you've always felt that way. Yeah. Well, I can tell you don't want to go further into it. But, yeah. Oh, I feel like the path. This is important to me, Mom. Is it important to you? Because I feel like
it surprises me. I've been able to express the being uncomfortable, but the depth of it surprises me.
Yeah.
Because I do see and relish what each of you proclaim, would tell me, show me in various ways. That's real and deeply appreciated and recognized. But maybe there's just something that isn't being touched. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
You had secret negative thoughts about your parents.
Yes,
Do you assume all kids have secret negative thoughts about their parents?
I never really thought about it. And when you say secret negative, like an example would be?
Like, I would never tell them to their face, but I think they were a shit parent.
Oh, yeah. Well, now here's an interesting thought, is that when I was in the second grade, we were one of the first families to have a TV in our neighborhood. And early on in TV, from, second grade to sixth grade or whatever, there might be, Father Knows Best or The Honeymooners. I was influenced by watching those. Donna Reed show. Here are these perfect families, Ozzie and Harriet. They're all perfect families, and they're talking to one another, and they're laughing with one another, participating with one another. And then you have the honeymooners who are shouting at one another and really seemed, well, as an adult looking back, seeming to be dysfunctional. I don't know what I thought of it as a child, although it did make me feel very uncomfortable, and I didn't watch it. I would leave the room because it seemed to be more like my family. This shouting and rah, 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 rah,
I don't think I knew that there was shouting a lot in your
Well,
family.
he had such a loud voice, and I don't like loud voices.
Yeah.
And he was always so dissatisfied, and
Oh.
but so there was this perfectness, this 1950s perfectness that I thought, oh golly, I didn't know that about other families. The only family you know is the one you grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't know what happens. And I've since talked with friends that I grew up with and have learned very different stories, that their family, I believed one thing and then learned another, that their family was difficult for them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And-
we were kind of Ozzie and Harriet and the Donna Reed show, Mom. I mean, maybe not entirely, but, you achieved it. Another thing that you could say is the self that we know is the self we assume later. And you were bullied by your older siblings and ignored, I think, by your parents.
Pretty much, yes, until I did something naughty.
Yeah.
Then I was not ignored.
But in that is what I know to be neglect, emotional neglect, where a child is constantly bidding for attention. You know, you are an expert with 4-year-olds, and they're constantly wanting attention. All they want from you is attention. If you can go to the bathroom on your own, you know, it's devastating to them. And so you were in a constant state of probably wanting that and bidding for that and not getting it at all, and or getting mistreated. So that the conclusion that you came to maybe was that you're just generally inadequate, and so nothing you can do can refute that.
Could be.
So
It's just a totally uncomfortable place to be.
and a lot of people might be able to relate, you know? So if you heard a listener saying this, what would you tell them?
I would say to look in the mirror and tell yourself to be strong, be brave, and that you could do it.
Yeah. When you say brave, what do you mean?
That this is just a bad patch and you can get through.
Yeah. But if someone at your age were to be calling in right now and had created, in your estimation, a wonderful family, but went through difficulty growing up, what would you tell them?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I would call on them to reflect and to see the positives.
To convince themselves?
Well, I don't know about convincing, because I think that's difficult to do, but I think to recognize it, to appreciate it, to know that it didn't probably just happen, that they had a part
reasons.
that they had a part in.
Oh, right. Yeah. Intellectually, to try to, if I'm interpreting right, you're saying, like, do your best to convince yourself, knowing that you're not going to truly convince yourself because deep down it's too entrenched, but you can temporarily kind of...
Well, to recognize, to be aware of the impact the positive impact that you had, rather than focusing on any negative impact that you might carry.
Yeah. If you could tell the 4-year-old little girl that's being neglected and bullied, what would you tell her? And she feels alone, but she's having adventures, but she feels neglected and hurt. What would you tell her?
I might have her look in the mirror and see herself, and to think about what a good friend might be. But looking into the, like, see herself as being enough, and that that person that she sees is strong and a very good person. And
you'd want her to know that she's good enough and she's a good person. Mm-hmm. You'd tell her that?
Oh, yes. It's important. That I think it's very important to be listened to, and beyond listening, to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Well, I felt heard, Mom, and I felt listened to.
Yay.
So you don't have to tell 4-year-old Kirk, because you did.
Well, without maybe knowing it, that was a very, very big priority. I wanted each of you children to know your value.
Mm-hmm. Does it look like we do?
Yes, I am very pleased. I don't feel that...
That's because of you, Mom. I mean, your parents screwed you up, right? It's their fault. And they screwed up your older siblings. I mean, I'm sure your older siblings had a lot of pros and cons.
Oh, yes.
But my older brother and sister didn't bully me the way your older siblings did. It's because of the way they were treated, generally. So in the same way that you can look to your parents as being the architects of your belief that you're not good enough, which is a tragedy. You can blame yourself for the fact that me and my siblings...
Or value, that you don't have value.
Yeah. I don't think there's any question that me and my siblings question that.
Good.
So...
That would be...
That's because of you. And, but Dad was there, absolutely, but he was at work. You were there all the time. So a lot hinged on you. You could have totally screwed it up.
And I did. I wasn't perfect.
You could have really screwed it up. All of us could be miserable human beings who hate their parents secretly and hate each other secretly and don't show up to things and show up by obligation or whatever, which has never been the case. Even your grandkids like showing up to things. That's what's surprising to me. We're going to our your 60th anniversary, wedding anniversary next month. And I put out the invitation to all the grandkids thinking not all of them would come, but they all did. And their boyfriends and girlfriends are all coming too. Which is also just like, why do they want to come?
Yeah.
And, more the merrier, it'll be great.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking it's just, and a good number of, half of them are coming over from Minnesota. It's not easy. Anyway, so have we moved the needle a little bit towards I'm a good person, I'm a good parent? Have we gotten a little further down that road?
Well, don't label it as such. That's a bit strong yet for me, but perhaps value.
I have value as a human being.
More value.
Yeah, more. I'm less of a piece of crap. That's what you're saying.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I mean, it takes a long
dear.
time. Change takes time.
Oh, dear.
If you can't get at some point before you leave this planet to at least be 51% I have value as a human being and as a parent, I will feel like I failed.
I feel that it may be possible, but it's something that I've worked on throughout life to have value.
Yeah. How?
And so how does one know that it's been achieved? How do you know?
Look at your kids. That's the whole point, Mom. Look at your children. Your whole life for a good number of years was about your kids and about family, right?
Yes, it was.
And they have their own minds and souls, and they can speak directly to you. You don't have to look at a piece of art and wonder if you did well. Like, the art is speaking back to you.
And that's the beauty of it, because they each do. Each of you children.
Yeah. So there's evidence. And there was no evidence that justifies making you feel like a piece of shit to begin with. It's not about evidence. Anyway, as you know, all children have inherent value. All people have inherent value, but particularly 4-year-olds, right? So the fact that you felt like a piece of shit when you were 4 isn't because of evidence. You weren't a bad child. It was because, well, I mean, if we go back far enough, it's because your dad was treated like a piece of shit when he was young. And your mom, I think, was treated less like a piece of shit, but maybe a little neglected. So who knows what it was like growing up. My impression was if Granddad was different, Grandma would have been different.
Your grandma, my mother, often wasn't a nice person. I don't think she knew how to mother, so maybe she wasn't mothered well.
Yeah, okay.
She certainly had a lot of siblings. She was second born, so she was put in charge of the younger ones a lot.
Her aunt died by suicide.
Yes.
So then you wonder how far back this mistreatment goes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Life was hard.
Yeah.
Life was hard.
Farming in Kansas and poverty and the Civil War and your dad was left in an orphanage even though both of his parents were alive.
Right.
Because his mom was depressed, I think, or
she was unable to function
like
as
severe,
a parent.
Yeah, severe mental illness of some sort, either severe depression,
right,
or maybe catatonic schizophrenia, or I don't know, something was going on with her. And then he's in an orphanage and
with his sisters.
And he's peeing the bed, which what you'll do when you're traumatized. And
Well, he's 2.
yeah. Well, also you do it when you're traumatized.
Yeah.
So the sisters would have to sneak into his crib and change his
Overnight.
So
they would at the orphanage, they'd have to sneak down into the large dormitory and check for his bed to see if it was wet or dry. If it was wet, they would change his sheets, then sneak back up.
because they were worried he would be disciplined or something.
Yes.
Yeah. At
because
2.
At 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beaten or
Yeah.
not given food or something. Yeah, pretty awful. And even if it was an
And the
idyllic,
sisters wanted to protect him.
yeah, even if it was an idyllic orphanage, it's still a massive attachment disruption. And you think you feel like a piece of shit. Imagine what your dad felt like.
Right.
And of course, no therapy mindedness, no vulnerability allowed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just, no son who's a podcaster who, takes the time, I suppose. But I do feel bad, Mom. I feel like I didn't know this until we talked last week. All of us kids want to give back and have tried, and I'm a shrink. I should have asked. I didn't know that you felt this way. I thought you reveled in what the two of you had accomplished. I would hear things from Dad occasionally. He would just seem to apologize out of nowhere. Yeah. He'd just be like, yeah, son, yeah, I'm just sorry for, not being a great dad sometimes. I'd be like, what Dad, no, but I thought, well, maybe it's an anomaly, but I think, yeah. And then last week, you're basically telling me you and Dad are in a constant state of shame about your parents, which is, Mom, it's so wrong.
I agree. It probably is wrong. But
I know it's wrong. I am the only one who can tell you it's right or wrong, Mom, because
yes.
I am the product. And I've spent my entire adult life analyzing myself, i.e. your parenting, and I can tell you, and treating other countless parents and kids and adults regarding the parenting that they went through. So if there's any child that can tell you, and if you think I'm lying, then I guess all this is thrown out the window. Then if
you've not lied to me.
Then if you think I'm telling the truth, then, at least intellectually, cognitive wise, this is all the evidence that you need. There's no other piece of evidence that you could look toward. Because kids can look like they're doing fine and look like they love you and look like they appreciate you and still be suffering greatly. I am so privileged to not have the problems that all my friends have. Berto, Bob, Rebecca, on this, and countless other people in my life have been through, pretty good parenting, but have significant issues regarding major traumas that they went through growing up. I don't have those. I don't have any of those because of you. You could have dropped the ball, You could have been more self-centered. You could have not paid attention to me. You could have not created a stable, loving home. You could have had more fights between you and Dad or something, I'm telling you. It's like being a plumber and your pipes leak. Being a family therapist who had a good mother and his own mother doesn't think he's a good mother. Like, I can help everyone on the planet, but if I can't help my own mother, what kind of human being am I? All it is just invest, because once you unearth, I'm guessing, those voices and really look at them from afar, the way you were treated growing up, if you really just kind of look at it, not from the 4-year-old's point of view, but from an adult's point of view, and go, I concluded something based on that wasn't right. It feels right because it feels right in my heart, but I know it's not right. And then you can start to dismantle the whole thing. You can start to tear it apart, but you can't tear it apart until you look at it from afar. You can look at specific instances maybe that you can remember, moments where your parents or your older siblings would treat you in a certain way, and the conclusion you might have drawn afterwards that stuck with you.
I agree. I think that there was definitely points, and on a daily, hourly basis sometimes, that weren't good for a child to experience. That's why I enjoyed being out in the world on my own.
Right. It's better out in the world.
Yes. On more than one occasion, I would say, I love school. I love school because it's not home.
Yeah, God. I never said that, Mom.
Because it was a safer place. It was
Yeah.
a place that
I'm sure many listeners can relate to that.
So-
And the thing to know, Mom, it's another kind of contrast to this, is what you went through is kind of more the norm than I think people realize. A lot of listeners might agree. What I went through is not the norm. I didn't go through good, typical childhood. I went through something really extraordinary. What you went through is, unfortunately, way more common.
And there's a sadness in my heart because I see that happening in the world. I mean, life is not easy. It's not easy growing up
Yeah.
under so many different circumstances that are difficult to overcome.
Wasn't your generation the generation that came up with the phrase that you were going to raise your kids under better conditions than you were raised?
I don't know. I would hope to believe that would always be true.
Yeah. But I feel like that's your generation phrase, because the war and the Great Depression and the
Our
scarcity.
generation, we changed our outlook on war. We changed our outlook on politics.
Civil rights and race.
Race. We changed our outlook on music. We changed our outlook on clothing. We changed our outlook on sex, the gender.
Mm-hmm.
That happened in our generation. When I was in grade school, young women did not wear jeans. Then jeans became universal to whatever. Anyone could wear jeans,
Yeah.
even babies. So it was a very extraordinary time. In the late 50s, early 60s, my peers and myself were very idealistic.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's always true for 18-year-olds, but certainly for us. And we were going to make change across the board.
Not my generation, Gen X, we were slackers. But yeah, your generation marched, even white people, marched alongside Martin Luther King.
Right.
Your generation protested the war and
Yes.
put themselves in front of rifles, the National Guard at Kent State. Your generation started to speak out against materialism. Whether you succeeded or not, it's hard to know.
Well, in all these things, it just dismays me to learn that we're really not very much farther ahead with regard to race.
Yeah.
It's still a huge divisional part of our country.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be.
Right. And Barack Obama will say it's important that we recognize the improvements that we have in our society. Are there still things left? Yes, absolutely. It's obvious. But to forget and dismiss the accomplishments of your generation and many activists, these fights did succeed to some extent.
And the ads on TV and so forth, I'm encouraged with the ads portraying different types of families. And that's a beginning. The fact that people of color can be portrayed in advertising, that's a huge deal. And in my reading of just popular fiction, there are different genders being portrayed. So there is change.
And
so I guess we can recognize that.
yeah. And you were a part of it, Mom, in a small way. You fell in love with who you fell in love with, but it took some courage for both of you to definitively, without question, elope and just say, this is going to happen.
Well, I also came
Lead
with
the way for other people. Didn't you have some people come to you and
Yes,
say,
they did.
because of you, I felt it was okay for me to also be in an interracial marriage?
Yes, people have said that. Our peers.
Yeah. Like, that's directly, part of the movement, right? I mean, you didn't marry a person of color
To do that.
on purpose.
Yeah.
But presumably there were a lot of other couples in your town that refrained, that gave up, that said this wasn't worth it, or didn't even consider it because it wasn't an option for them, because it'd be disgusting to marry outside of you and Dad didn't do
Well,
that.
it would be difficult. That would be the word coming. Like even our dating, our peers, both Dad's friends and my friends, they were totally aware. Weren't hiding our relationship with our friends. There was no need to, because there just was understanding or acceptance. But just the fact that we were dating may have been a step too far for some of our peers.
Yeah. And what bums me out is that on the internet today, the younger people will just make fun of what they call boomers. They'll say, oh, boomers and boomer this and boomer that. And it's ageism, clearly, plain and simple. And I'm just thinking, you idiots. One, no generation is better than the other. But to just blanketly make fun of the baby boomer generation, you do not know what they have done for you, what accomplishments that they fought and died for. To be that ignorant of history and that ignorant of an entire generation, and how dare you talk about my parents that way? Do not do that. And it really gets under my skin. So let's take a break, and then let's really try to do lightning round. What do you say?
Okay.
All right, we're back from the break. So, patron Sarah, she just wanted to say, no question, I just wanted to say you're amazing, Dr. Honda's mom.
Oh, dear.
Patron Tanya and YouTube member Jody asked the same question. What sibling role did Kirk play? Like, was he the protector, the helpful one, the silly one, the angsty one? So what role would you say it was among the 4 siblings?
Well, that's curious, isn't it? How do I explain this? First there was Mark, and then 22 months later was Colleen. So Colleen was the youngest for 6 years. So she was pretty much a clown. I always think the youngest is the clown. And then Kirk comes along, and so now he's takes on the role of the clown in the family, and we just enjoy him. He's just, the youngest is always so cute and endearing and fun to laugh at. Not in a hurtful way, of course. And then 6 years later, Kevin is born, and then he's the clown. So I had 3 children that were strong, had learned to be humorous, and also Mark, actually, in his way. But so they each had their role to be the youngest. Mm-hmm. And then also Kirk was a middle child, and I don't know how he perceives that, whether he had less responsibility or more responsibility. Or,
a lot less.
Or just how...
I didn't do any chores.
Well, I don't know that any of you did.
Well, Mark and Colleen would talk about how they would at least do the dishes. I think they did a lot more chores than I did, my impression.
Well, there was a period of time there that I wanted them to earn their allowance.
Right.
And I wanted them to learn the concept of putting some in savings, to donate some, and to have personal savings.
Right.
And just flamboyant.
Well, famously, Mark saved up literal pennies and nickels to save up for our Atari 2600 system.
He was on the search in the cushions and in any possible place.
But he would also do little chores to earn pennies. So if you do this, you'll get a penny. And he saved up, I think, $200 or something. And we got an Atari. And I was just, for people older than me, they remember this time when, so wait, you can actually do things on your television? Because up until that point, TV was just a passive thing that happened at you.
Right.
And now you could actually do things on your television and also play video games at home for free. And it was just mind-blowing. And man, we loved that Atari. And what a great thing that Mark did that. Yeah. So I didn't know I was the clown growing up, but I can see that. There's evidence in pictures where I'm seemingly joking around a lot or something as like a 5-year-old.
Well, I don't know, too. There was a very serious side to you.
Yeah.
And some people would even look upon you, not knowing you, total strangers, and would see a very intense child.
Yeah.
Because of your eyes. Your eyes were so telling. I remember taking you to Mark's karate class, and we sat along the wall, and it had been cold out, so you had a hood on. And the instructor came over after class and said, here you were, just 18 months approaching 2, and here you were being recognized by this karate instructor because he said you would one day be very good at karate because he saw it in your eyes. They were so intense.
Ironically, I was never going to. I did ask to take karate lessons when I was, I don't know, maybe 10 or something, and you refused because you said that you had already been fully committed to all 4 of us kids doing all these various things. At the time, I was bummed out, but looking back, I'm like, yeah, how did the 2 of you do this? Because all of us were in sports year-round. We were in school.
And equipment.
Yeah, equipment, and you had to drive us there. That we didn't take the bus or anything to these things. You had to or pick us up from there, and all the games and all that kind of stuff, and then the school activities, the concerts and whatnot, church activities. I don't blame you for saying, I draw the line. You're already in 6 sports. You can't also take karate because I can't get you there, kind of a thing. Okay. So patron member, YouTube member Britt and patron Monica, she says, what was Dr. Honda like as a teen? Was he easy or difficult?
Oh my goodness.
Where's this gonna go?
Oh, he wasn't difficult in how difficult some teens could be. He was just someone that
Like I wasn't like dropping out of school or
right
using
poor
drugs.
grades or and he was a strong student. So those were all positives. But being that he's a thinker, sometimes he would stretch our boundaries.
Yeah. So can I tell you a memory and then you can maybe
Yes.
fill in the gaps because I don't. So I remember you and Dad when I was around 16-ish or something, maybe younger. You seemingly went on a campaign to engage with me more because
This was when you were 12.
oh.
Because when you think about it, you were very much the middle child. And the 12-year-old primarily goes into themselves. They
Right.
want to be in their room alone and be by themselves or with their buddies.
Yeah.
But have nothing to do with the family.
Right.
And so when you were 12, you had your own room downstairs, and I didn't want you to go down there and vegetate. I wanted you to come up and be part of the family.
Okay. Yeah. The way the house was configured, the middle floor, the split level was the living room area, and then the upstairs was the main bedrooms where you and everyone else was. And then I was once Mark moved out, I was the only one in the basement. It was also the daycare center downstairs as well, but yeah, I
But
could.
you had your space that was
Right.
yours alone.
Yeah, and I'm still that way. This office that you're in right now is evidence of that. Like I really like to be alone when I'm thinking and working and that kind of stuff. And I like to make it comfortable and exactly the way I want it to be. I like all my things to be there. It's very important to me. And so I was like that particularly then. Well, anyway, so I don't know if it was I don't feel like it wasn't when I was 12 when this memory was.
Okay.
But it's somewhere in that zone. And I have this memory of, you and Dad coming down into my room and just trying to engage with me or saying, hey, come upstairs. And what Dad would do is VCRs had just came into the home. And so he would say, hey, let's watch a movie together on VHS. And I remember watching the first Terminator movie. I hadn't heard of it before. And he's like, yeah, at the video store, they said this movie might be good. And so there's these moments of that pulling me out of my bedroom. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I would stay in my bedroom all the time and write music and stuff. I had all my keyboards and sequencers and drum machines and guitars and amps. And, I had this little studio in this tiny little bedroom down there. Anyway, but my memory is you and I sitting on my bed and we're arguing about something, not like yelling at each other, but debating something. And in my head, it was something like I had decided in my narcissistic, childish way that I didn't have to do small talk, or I didn't have to consider other people's feelings when I meet them or something, like I don't have to say hello, or I don't have to shake their hand, or I don't know, something along those lines. I had made this choice because I was insecure, but I was using quote unquote logic as a way of protecting myself from the insecurity. And you didn't like that. You thought it wasn't a good idea for someone to think those things. It was something along those lines. And we were going back and forth, and I was stubborn and sticking to it. And I think by that point, I had developed somewhat of at least a confidence, whether or not I was good at it or not, in being able to debate things in my childish way. So I didn't become flustered in the debate. I just kept, reiterating or coming at it from different angles or something, and you were getting more and more frustrated. And then at some point I am
not a debater.
Right. And at some point you started crying, and I felt terrible that you were crying. And do you remember anything like this?
I don't, but I know I'm not a confronter, so if you were coming on strong, it would have been very uncomfortable for me.
But you were the one trying to convince me of something is the thing. And I was just flippantly and immaturely just holding my ground. I feel like there were a number of instances like that where I was pontificating or deciding on some philosophy of life, because that's what I was doing in my teenage years. And you would be alarmed by some of the things I was concluding, and you would try to disabuse me of those things, and it wouldn't work. Do you remember things like that?
Well, to a degree I do. I don't recall it ever being a particular problem, but it was a realization that you had very strong opinions and different from my own. And that would cause me to think, for instance, when you were graduating, and I don't know if you had the responsibility or how it all came about, but for baccalaureate, you were to work with a parent, and you were so frustrated with this parent because they just didn't get it. They wouldn't
Well, can I tell you what happened?
Please.
And then you can tell me how you saw it. So for graduation, there's this secondary graduation called baccalaureate that is a religious ceremony. And as a Christian and all the other Christian students it was off campus. It wasn't official.
Yeah, it wasn't school sponsored.
Right. But we would all dress up in our regalia for graduation, and there would be this secondary graduation ceremony essentially. And I was friends with this guy, and his mom was kind of in charge of the whole thing. And so I had worked with them because I was big into stage performance and songwriting. And one of the things that I very stupidly decided to take on was I had written a religious song that was based on a Bible verse. And I wanted to make a version that was for a chorale, because I was also in vocal jazz, and I knew a lot of the seniors that would be there, and we could sing the song. So I made this arrangement. It was a 4-part harmony, and I presented it to everyone, but we only practiced it, I think, literally once, and it was terrible. So just on that note, we end up performing it at baccalaureate in front of all these people, and it went horribly wrong. I mean, it was so bad. But it was because I didn't understand that rehearsal is important, Like I'd never I had written music, I had performed it, but I'd never had to get a bunch of other, like 15 other people to be good enough to perform it as a group. I just figured they would figure it out because they're all excellent singers and musicians, and it was really embarrassing. But the issue that you're bringing up is the woman that was in charge of everything. She had made the program, like, okay, this person's going to do this now. And they had asked me to lead a prayer at the baccalaureate. And there were like a couple different moments like that. And then, and I was, I have a real love-hate relationship with being on stage. I love it, but it just terrifies me. So I don't even know why I was doing these things. Anyway, so she, at the last moment, the day of, pulls out and says, "You're not doing the prayer." 99% sure this is how it went down. And she, looking back, she was in over her head because I don't think she had ever ran an event like this. She didn't seem to know what she was doing. As an 18-year-old, I didn't see that. All I saw was an adult that was pulling the rug out from underneath me and denying, I'd prepared this whole thing. And why me? Why was I the one that was being, cut out of the schedule while your son is still going on, Now, looking back, maybe it was because I was doing two different things on the stage and I didn't need to do two different things. But I don't know. All I felt was that the explanation. And I remember going to her, I was like, "What's going on?" And I think she was flustered. Again, I didn't care when I was 18. And she just was like, "That's just the way it's going to be." And I was really incensed about it. So then I tell you about it because I'm real angry and probably pontificating. And so you can continue your side of the story.
You were really frustrated with her because you felt like she, for someone in her position, should be more responsible, should have things more put together. Why was she just, I don't know, not having control of what you felt she needed to have control? I just know you were really butting heads with her.
Like to her face?
No.
Yeah.
But just...
pontificating.
Yes, the two of you were just not really coming together with a true understanding. I don't know if it was even possible under those circumstances. But that was the eye-opening to me in that, for one thing, I learned that you had less patience than I thought you had or ought to have. And that you were, again, a person of value, that you needed to be listened to by this woman. And you just didn't feel like you were being listened to. So that was eye-opening to me. Also, so was it your senior prom where you dressed as you did?
Yeah.
Well, I was just appalled because what I learned.
So in my way, I wanted to buck the trend and dress in something outlandish for my senior prom. And
did you set out to do that? Was that your goal?
Yeah. Well, part of it was that I guess because I was just so done with high school. Normally with homecoming and Tolo, that was our two big dances. I would prepare for a long time in advance of it. I would think about it. I would ask someone a month in advance. I was really big into high school activities, as a lot of my friends were.
Yes, you were.
Yeah. I feel like everyone in my high school was big into high school activities. I mean, there were, smaller sections, subgroups that weren't as much, but it wasn't. I feel like there were other schools, even at that time, where they would say, well, really no one goes to the dances. The uncool kids do those things or something. In our school, everyone did it, all the things, I think it's another part of the privilege that I had of growing up was that my schools and the kids and the teachers and everything, there, it's relatively low problems that you would see, and general goodwill or pep or, pride in your school. And I don't know. And so, for some reason, I was just so done with school. I was, because it had been a year and a half of me just withering away in boredom and had neglected to think about prom. And so I, at the last minute, thought, oh, crap, because everyone's going, my friends are going, it's senior prom, you got to go. And I didn't know who to ask. And so the first person I asked was this other guy. It was a kid that was younger by 3 years. He was our mascot. We had a group of friends, and he was, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, he was our mascot. He was a small, younger kid, and we just thought he was funny, and we took him under our wing. We didn't go out with him on the weekends, but at school we would hang out with him anyway. And so I thought it'd be hilarious if two guys went to the prom. And so I asked him seriously, and to say, we'll both get tuxes and da-da-da, because he was really desperate to impress us. He really looked up to us.
Wanted to be part of the gang.
Yeah. And he was really on the fence. And then he's like, but, you're leaving the school. And, this is the 80s. And he's like, I have 3 more years of this school. And if this is out there that I went to a dance with a guy, this is going to affect things,
What a mature approach.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. So the next person on my list was a friend of mine, Susan. And I asked her. And oh, no, you know what it is, Mom? So my best friend, Lita, who who I started the podcast with, we were best friends then, and I would have absolutely gone with her because it just made sense. But her sister died. Do you remember this?
Yes, very much.
Her sister died in a drunk driving accident, very suddenly, about a couple months before prom. So at the end of my senior year, would have been Lita's junior year. And she didn't go to school for a number of weeks. The family was mourning, right? And it was this really tragic event, a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, a lot of things to kind of patch up. Someone else in the car ended up suing the family, the Lita's family, because of the injuries or something. Can't remember exactly. So, Lita was mourning. And although in my head I thought, well, Lita and I should go to prom, it felt really inappropriate to ask her to prom in the middle of all this. You know what I mean? It didn't even really cross my mind, right? But I think I figured that's what would happen. Well, this other guy who barely knows her calls her out of the blue. They're not romantically involved with each other, mind you. They barely know each other. I think he ran out of options and no one else would go with him, or I don't know. But he calls her during the mourning process while, total chaos and sadness and da-da-da. And she answers the phone and this kind of random distant guy asks her, and she's just like, okay, yeah. I mean, because she doesn't know what to say. It's just, it's like, okay, yeah, I get, in this daze of, what's going on. And then by the time it became a conversation between me and Lita, she's like, oh, well, actually, this other guy already asked me. I'm like, who? And I'm like, him? Like, he doesn't even know you. She's like, yeah, I don't know. I said yes. I at another time, I would have said no, but I don't know. I didn't know what else to say because I just was in the middle of some really bad times. And so that's why I was waiting a long time, I think, is the long and short of it.
Well, and you had invited a junior.
Right. So I asked her friend, Lita's friend, Susan, which is also a friend of mine. Anyway, so it was so last minute by the time I had gotten around because of what happened to Lita that I hadn't rented a tux, and it was like a few days before prom that I had even...
Very much a few days.
And so I decided, well, what do I do? And I was like, well, how about I just, instead of trying to... Because I didn't have a suit, that I didn't own any super nice clothes.
Well, you had your grandfather's jacket.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I did.
And it was silk.
Yeah. And I could have worn that. And I could. And
I think you did.
No. I bought all clothes from Value Village, and I had these gray jeans that I didn't like that much. And Lita actually, I gave the jeans to her, and she actually wrote graffiti all over my pants. and then Susan and I went to Value Village. It's a secondhand store. And she bought like a dress from the 60s, and we had sunglasses.
It was brocade.
Yeah.
She had purchased a brocade dress and with a high hemline.
Yeah. Very Jackie O kind of looking dress to me anyway.
You wore a bandana. You wore beads. You had...
So the 60s were coming back in style at the time, just so everyone knows. And I was a part of that.
And my thought was, oh my goodness, it's fine for Kirk to do this, but I felt sorry for Susan.
Oh, you
and
did?
I did. I knew that she was okay at one level, but I thought at least when she's a senior, she can do a prom more appropriately than how you had approached it.
Mm-hmm. So was that the whole story? Was that you were trying to debate with me?
That you would surprise me sometimes with how you would attack traditional situations in a non-traditional way.
Yeah.
Looking back, it's comical and fun, and also learning later your perspective on it. But going through it at the time, it was like, oh my goodness, what's happening here?
It's really cringy when I look at the pictures. It's really cringy. I mean, so I thought since it was our senior prom, there would be more shenanigans like that. I thought a lot, because, at other dances, homecoming, Tolo, some of the people, usually the guys, would do something kind of funny. They would rent like a really 70s style tux, with the flare shirt and the powder blue style, and it would be hilarious. And
but it still was more traditional,
right?
know?
But it was still a joke,
Yeah.
It wasn't a problem, and it was funny. And I'd never done anything like that. Well, I show up to prom, and it was at Union Station, or I think Union Station that's what's called, the train station downtown Seattle that they converted to some sort of event hall. And I was walking up there, and there was a chaperone, some mother who didn't know me, wasn't going to let me in.
Right. But
what I found out going into the dance was no one else had done anything weird. Everyone was dressed normal. Like I was the only one, and I was so far afield.
So opposite.
Yeah. And I thought, and then it felt kind of awkward, actually. I thought I would be one of a couple dozen of people that would do various different things. It turns out like I was the only one. It felt like it didn't feel good. I'll put it to that way.
Oh, that makes me feel good in some level.
I mean,
I never knew that until now.
I don't think I cared very much, but even looking,
you did recognize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I made so many mistakes like that growing up. There were so many times when I would think it would be funny to do this, and then I would do it and then just deeply regret it as I'm doing it. Oh God, like just don't. But when I look at the pictures now, it's still kind of cringy because of that, but also because I just look so stupid is the thing. I think I just look so dumb. I mean, I don't care. It's not a regret of mine, but
it didn't define you.
No. But yeah, it was, but she looks great. Susan looks great.
Yeah. So there were these moments where I just didn't know where you were coming from and thinking that you were finding your way.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so, now I sound like an insufferable idiot as a teenager. Let's move on. YouTube member and Patreon member Paola, she says, when in Kirk's life did you think, wow, he's an adult?
Oh, goodness. When does one ever become an adult? But I suppose if you can laugh at a fart joke or something with the rest of the family, then maybe you're an adult.
Really? Like kids? I thought the kids would laugh at that too.
Well, you might laugh and be awkward.
So wait, your answer to the question, when did you notice that Kirk was an adult, was when he laughed at a fart joke with everybody else? That is the most Honda family answer. We have the oldest grandchild, Jessica. Whenever we get together, she's like, all you guys do is talk about farts. All of you, mom, because her mom, Colleen, she talks about farts sometimes, but man, when you guys get together, it's just constant fart talk. And it is true.
Well, it's amusing, isn't it?
So that's how you know when I've become an adult. The perfect answer, Mom. Let's just end that question there.
Okay.
It's my best blank stare.
Funny faces.
Guess what I'm doing?
Farting.
See?
You can fart on the
I
go,
can
though.
recognize it.
And it doesn't even look different than her normal.
What does Cliff look like when he farts?
I don't fart.
He fluffs.
Delicate and
He's like a flower.
cultured. I'm cultured.
Right.
Only the conversations about farting.
We talk about farts too much in our family. Well, we fart 13 times a day, so
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the topic.
Really? You, like,
It's
you
our
actually
bond.
counted that? Have you ever like kept like a fart journal? Like to know?
I should keep a fart journal.
Yeah, maybe you are about that. She's like, please. No, please. Because I know you'll do it. Let's not think about this.
He will. He writes
know.
everything down.
Right there.
What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that.
You got it on your hand? 10:01 p.m.
Everything is general.
Patron and YouTube member Thoby, she says, when did you know Kirk was going to be great in whatever career he chose? Or did you ever know that?
Oh, there was never a moment like that. There's moments of hoping that there would be success in whatever Kirk might choose to do. But even he was what you might call all over the map in knowing what it was he was wanting to do. And we touched on this in a previous time when I wasn't full of, neither Alan or I were full of advice or full of guidance and resources. We didn't have that available to us, and we didn't pass that on to the children. So to think of him as being a professional anything was a desire, but not something that I could visualize.
Yeah, it is weird, but understandable given your upbringing, that there was literally no conversation around that. But there was one thing that you and Dad were adamant about, which is that I went to college. So, because I think to you, because Dad sort of went to college.
And you could choose what you wanted to study.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't even a conversation. It was just obvious. Now, Colleen, she was sort of a mentor to me in that way because she did precede me at the University of Washington and had been through it, both the Greek system and the School of Business. So I just followed in her footsteps, and I remember her advising me a bit. But yeah, I was kind of all over the map for a while. Patron Tanya, she says, I don't have a question. I just want to tell you that you sound like an awesome rock and roll mama. Kirk always talks about you with so much love and appreciation. You both are beautiful souls. I can't wait to meet you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Patron Zach, he says, what was the biggest challenge with raising Kirk? That stupid outfit he wore at prom.
Well, I don't know. I don't really think of Kirk as being a challenge. He was a delight. I look back at him as being, the early years, he was a good sleeper. He was a good eater.
Yeah, I'm still a good sleeper.
And a good eater.
I'm such a good sleeper that there's a picture of it where I fell down the stairs and fell asleep.
Well, you chose that step to sleep.
Oh.
You were playing and fell asleep.
Yeah. At the bottom of the stairs, like in this weird position. Yeah.
And you didn't have to have your place in the automobile. I mean, you didn't have to always sit by the window, or you didn't have these strong feelings that you had to have your way all the time. You were not particularly a joyful child. There are those children who are just joyful and pleasant to be around, but you were pleasant enough. I remember wanting to take a picture of you and asking for you to smile. Smile.
How old do you think I was?
You were about 3. Remember, in that cowboy outfit that you were wearing.
Oh, is that the picture?
Yes.
Okay.
And I said, smile, smile, wanting you to smile for the camera. And I took the picture anyway, and I asked you, why didn't you smile for me? And you said, I was smiling on the inside.
Yeah.
And
so this is one of those stories that's been told every now and then. And I remember it being even told when I was like 6 or 7. And I believe I actually remember that moment. That's one of the ways you can remember things, is if the story is told and the recall is there. And I remember what it felt like to respond that way. I remember feeling like I was smiling.
Well, and to me, it was such a deep answer. I mean, you were in touch to know that you were smiling.
Or I was happy.
Yeah.
I felt good, but it wasn't showing on my face.
And does it need to?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Isn't it more important to have the feeling than to have the expression?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can have the expression without the feeling.
Yeah.
So I just, that was just remarkable to me.
Huh.
And then I loved your imagination. You managed to do wonderful things with your dad's video camera. It was so creative. And you had good friends who had good parents. You know what I mean? It just seemed solid to me. You didn't cause extreme worry. I do remember leaving a note on your door that you were in deep doo-doo.
Yeah.
But I don't recall why.
Was it because I had a party while you were gone?
It could have been that.
Yeah.
And I remember coming home and
I
seeing
forgot
it.
about that. Yeah, I remember this note. You're in deep doo-doo. I mean, for those who watch The Simpsons, my mom is sort of like Flanders. She has these, these phrases like fiddlesticks. You'll say, "Oh, fiddlesticks," and
Ackin' Pucky.
and that you would be actually trying to communicate you're angry, and you would say you're in deep doo-doo. But you guys never really went after me. I even remember that for the most part that, yeah, I got in trouble because you and Dad would almost never leave the house, but you would on New Year's Eve, you would go to Auntie Carol's house and have a couple drinks and stay out late. It was the one time of the year that would happen. And I don't think you did every year, but you would sometimes.
Oh, I think it was. We'd do something on New Year's and we'd get blasted as a couple.
And since you didn't drink the rest of the year, you're probably
Yeah.
a cheap date. And I think you would stay late because you didn't want to drive drunk. or
we
something.
had to bring in the New Year together as a party.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
with all these people.
and given that everyone's night owls, you wouldn't come home till like 6 a.m. or something. So I would capitalize on that and have parties at the house. I mean, it was on the smaller side. It would be like 10, 15 people or something. But there was this one year when someone brought alcohol, and we didn't get drunk, but, had a couple drinks and we got messy with something. I can't remember. We spilled something, and I didn't clean it up. I didn't.
I'm quite sure you weren't aware.
Yeah. So you found that when you got home and figured I must have had a party or something, and you said I'm a deep doo-doo.
Well, when you see this big water balloon splat on the kitchen door and the rivulets of liquid running down to the base of the door, you knew something happened, and that
forgot.
was not a water balloon.
I forgot. Yeah. That's what it was. And the thing is we weren't doing anything bad. It was pretty innocent. And from my memory, I go, "Oh, I'm in deep doo-doo," and I went to talk to you guys, and the two of you are just like, "Yeah, don't do that again," or something. Like it wasn't anything. Because
Well, we didn't ground you or
right.
yell at you. Or
I think you grounded me once in my childhood, like just one time.
For how long?
Like one night, and I was astonished that you had grounded me. I'm like, what is happening?
The audacity to do that.
Yeah, it was really a shock. Patron Soft Noodles, good old Soft Noodles, and Patron Mike, they wanted to ask, can you tell an embarrassing story from Kirk's childhood?
Well, I think that prompt to me was embarrassing to me to think that my son was leaving the house like that. Another time was when he was going out skiing, or was he just going to school? I don't know, but he was just wearing long underwear. I just couldn't believe that he was leaving the house.
Yeah, I probably
simply in long underwear.
I probably wore long underwear to school. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I think I did the classic where I would dress differently on the way out the door and then I would change in the car.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past you. But one time you decided to forego that and just leave in your long underwear.
Well, at the time I remember thinking that, okay, I get it, but I wasn't the only one that was doing stuff like that. And plus, it wasn't that strange. Me and my friends did some really weird stuff at school, and we again, so bored. We were just, at least I was so bored that I just wanted to do something, that had a novelty to it. And dressing like that, might have been a small part of it. But
This reminds me too of when did I recognize that you had become an adult was a previous question. And so we're going through these things. You start to take on responsibility of being responsible for your actions, paying your bills, making decisions toward your life. These are all symptoms of becoming an adult, but I would be surprised if somebody called me an adult. I'm an adult by age, but I don't know that I'd ever consider myself an adult by behavior. I don't know.
you still don't feel like an adult?
No, I'm not ready to do the adult thing yet, even though I'm 79. I will pay the bills and I will do the grocery shopping.
Yeah, I can see that. So a bunch of people asked, what were your thoughts when you found out Dr. Kirk wanted to become a therapist?
I thought, no way.
Yeah, really, right?
True. He saw the world in black and white, or you saw the world in black and white,
Or that version of me back then did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and you were learning, hadn't achieved it. You were learning to be patient. So Kirk was, I don't know whether it was true to his core, but he seemed to be very confident, and that I'm not sure that he was a particularly good listener.
Yeah.
So I thought those were kind of essential to be a good therapist.
Yeah.
And I didn't see evidence of that.
Did you think I would fail?
No. You would never fail at anything.
But did you think I wouldn't like it, or did you think it wouldn't last?
I
or-
just didn't think it was a good fit.
You think I'd be unhappy?
Yeah. I just thought I would like to have known why you believed that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, it is kind of a mystery.
I can't have to say that I didn't see the potential in you for this field, but your mentors did.
Yeah.
They recognized something in you. They encouraged and nurtured that in you, and became valuable to you I believe, for you to become the man that you are in this field, not due to anything that we did, because I didn't see it myself.
Well, and it wasn't...
You were a young man, too. You were just beginning to learn.
Well, I always say that I was, just a frat guy. When I applied at the age of 24, I had just graduated from University of Washington the year before, pretty much, and I had just left the fraternity a year previous. And yeah, I was this young douchebag who was going out with his buddies literally every night and being young men. And why did I think I could be a therapist? It just seemed to fit, though. And that's interesting. You certainly never indicated back then that you didn't think I would be good at it or something, or you'd think it'd be a bad fit. But that does make sense. Of course, that's how you would see it. Because, yeah, I wasn't one of those people that was known for being a good listener that people would come to. People did, but not in that way. There's certain people you just know, like, oh, you go to that person, they'll listen and they'll be soft and, they won't judge you. I wasn't one of those people. But I developed it rather quickly, independent of my mentors, actually, because the mentors didn't really happen till later. My internship happened, pretty quickly in my graduate degree, and I think once I was tasked with listening, I reveled in it. It felt comfortable. I liked, as a therapist, people, the podcast listeners might have a hard time imagining this, maybe, that when I'm in therapy, 90% of the time I'm listening, and that's what I want to do. It's not that I'm being forced. It's like it feels totally comfortable to be in that position. I don't need to talk all the time. With a lot of my friends, I feel like I'm listening more than I'm talking. Umberto, for example, like he's much more of a talker than I am, and I'm listening. So, I mean, certainly I can talk, but my point is that that's interesting that you saw that. But of course, yeah, because I was not the type. I did not fit the stereotype of someone that would become a therapist.
And you were quick to decide things. You were very, right now, you know, whatever it was,
Yeah, it was very quick.
yeah.
I mean, it was out of nowhere. Like, I think it was like March of 95 that I had even the notion of that as a career possibility. And by the next month, I was already taking prereqs. And by that fall, by that September, I was in graduate school becoming a therapist. And that's a very fast turnaround. Maybe the fastest I've ever heard anecdotally from I want to be a therapist to now I'm in graduate school to now I'm actually a therapist, you know.
I want to interject here that you talk about talking over listening and that sort of thing. I felt like you did listen. When we talked to you, you would always listen and look into our eyes. You didn't try to look away. You didn't, you know, you were really absorbing what it is we were wanting to talk with you about. You also weren't heavy into talking. You were easy enough to talk with or be a conversationalist, but you didn't take over talking. You know, you didn't take over conversations. You didn't talk over others. You would listen that way. So I guess it's a semantic thing that I'm trying to make clear is that you were a conversationalist, but not overly so. You would listen. But I was surprised in some ways because you were quick to come to decisions. It seemed like this was a pretty major decision. Shouldn't it take some more time? And you just discussed that and how quick
Yeah.
it was for you.
Patron Luna says, do you ever worry and feel overly protective about Kirk considering how the internet sometimes treats him?
I'm really insulated from a lot of that. There are occasions when I've read comments, and if I read something that is negative or abrasive, I just scroll on because I don't want to internalize it at all. Because I think, oh, they don't know. They don't know my son. So I don't look for it, certainly. And if I do come across it, I just scroll on.
So 2 last questions that I think a lot of people had questions around. And the first one is, what is your best parenting advice to young parents right now?
Be adaptable. In that way, you can somewhat go with the flow. If you're experiencing a problem, maybe separate yourself a bit from it and find out if it's a problem for you or if it's a problem for them.
To avoid overreacting.
Right. I don't think overreaction is good. Sometimes in overreacting, the child has to dig in their heels even further and to make their point. Easy to say, to listen, but I think it's really important that now why did you say that, or why are you doing that this way, or try to understand your child, I guess. Also, expose your child, I think, is important. Expose your child to new experiences. It's so valuable for them to see that their way or your family's way isn't the only way. Don't insulate them from the ugliness. If there are homeless camps or so forth, don't drive around them. I think it's important that children know that there are all different ways of life.
And the final question from a lot of people, what is the secret to a happy marriage?
To laugh, to recognize that there's humor, that the other person has value.
What do you mean?
Respect that person, that it's really important that you see each other as the individuals that you are and that you can be very different from one another and still enhance one another, and to bring yourself to that union in your differences.
Well, Mom, it's been a journey.
It has. Goodness sake. But a fun one, wasn't it?
How did it feel?
Well, I suppose it wasn't so bad that I wouldn't do it again.
Maybe we will.
And it's always a joy to see you, talk with you, learn more about who you are, and consequently learn more about who I am.
Well,
So-
thanks for joining, everyone. And I've had this idea for a long time. And when I asked you, I thought you would be more readily agreeing to it, but you actually were hesitant because of the nervousness that you felt about being.
Well, and there's nothing that I feel like I can bring to the table that is going to make any difference to anyone in listening
oh, Mom.
to what I have to say.
Well, there's that internalized voice.
Yep.
And I was surprised by that, and it took me a bit to reassure you about what the process was going to be like.
Yes, once you made it clear that I might have an idea of what kinds of questions,
Yeah.
that it wouldn't be popped on me.
Yeah. And also, I knew that the listeners would be desperate to, even if it was just a light conversation where you talked about gardening or something, people want to know you. I talk about you a lot, you and Dad. And I've been in those shoes as a listener to another podcast where you hear about the parents, but then you finally meet them on the podcast, and it really is enriching. Because you listen to the podcast and you feel like you know these podcasters, right? And
Well, you invite the podcasters into your life,
Yeah.
and into your home and into your car.
right. And to meet the parents is to extend your understanding of the podcaster, to know where they come from, to get other people's opinions about, who knows someone better than their parents. No one knows me better than, aside from Stacy, I suppose, than you and Dad, right? So there's this behind the scenes kind of look, I guess. But for me, we've done this before. We've done it 10 times. We had these sessions, I think it was about 10 times.
Well, and I, excuse me, I really enjoyed those times because it felt like I was giving history
Yeah,
to our family
right.
in a fashion that I could do it.
Yeah, so in those sessions, I was mainly focused on before I was born and learning about all the things that and I don't even think we got to my childhood in those 10 sessions. And so with this set of conversations, it's almost like the natural progression, because we did go into childhood and what it was
Your
like parenting.
childhood.
Yeah. So in a way, we've kind of completed the whole series in a way, the last 3 being public, But also, it's a weird thing, Mom. I experienced this with my friends that, me and Umberto can be best friends. We can talk all the time, but it's really different when you're podcasting. You're forced to put your phone down and really talk back and forth, to focus on each other and to maybe go deeper than normal or something. And it feels different, something that is hard to achieve in other formats of conversation,
I so relish conversations like this with you, of course, but with anybody that I engage with.
Yeah.
Whether it's with a friend, a family member, a grandchild, it's these kinds of conversations that I enjoy so much. I sat down with our youngest granddaughter, who's 10, in the library, and she showed me a book she was wanting to check out. And at the very last page of this book talked about sitting down with a stranger and what kinds of questions you might ask them. So I turned to her and I said, "So, pretend that I'm a stranger. What kinds of questions would you ask me if you didn't know anything about me?" And so she asked me what my favorite color is, which she knows full well. And then she said, well, what's your second favorite color? And she didn't know that. And
Favorite color is yellow, right?
yes,
Sun yellow.
yes. And so we had a good exchange that way. She would ask me different things, and we don't have conversations, it seems, at any level anymore. It's more of, could you get that for me, or could you do this for me, or the business side of life gets to be too much of our life. We don't really take the time to visit.
Well, I don't know if you notice, and I don't even know if this is true, but I do try to create more meaningful
I
conversations.
do notice that.
okay.
It's very apparent.
Oh, okay.
It's
Very apparent. Okay. Even when there's 15 of us, I try to, I don't know, just have a deeper, more meaningful conversation, or even just an exploration of something. But yeah, I guess I'm glad it's noticed.
And you do that by asking questions. I don't mean you, but I mean one does that by asking questions.
Yeah.
You can sit next to a stranger. You can sit next to someone you've known all your life, but you can ask questions and learn further.
Yeah. So maybe start a podcast with your grandchildren, and you'll have endless, deep conversations forever.
Yes, wouldn't that be fun?
All right, Mom. Well, let's go get lunch. What do you say?
I'm for it. My tummy says so.
And everyone, please take care of yourself, because
You most certainly deserve it.
and Mom taught me that I deserve it, and so that's why I always say that at the end of the episodes.